Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me on another episode of the Handle That podcast, and I'm going to jump right into it. Today we're going to talk about emotional issues and how to control them if you have them. Now, what do I mean by emotional issues? Well, if you see yourself as being somebody who's quick to anger, that's an emotional issue. If you see yourself as being codependent on somebody for long stretches of time, that's an emotional issue. If you see yourself as somebody who, does a specific thing when stress levels get too high, you may stress eat, you may stress spend, you may, have stress induced lots of sex, which are induced by stress, that's an emotional issue, and these issues are very serious and they're very severe, if they're left unchecked. So how do we go about understanding this? Well, if you've been watching the podcast, listening to the podcast, you know that one of the reoccurring themes that I preach is having a solid understanding of what exactly it is. Now, usually, it's not always, but usually an emotional issue is usually, a byproduct of childhood trauma. One thing that I preach is that what you lacked as a child growing up, you crave, you sometimes fiend for as an adult, because the way that you're made up, that part of life needed to be fulfilled. At some point in time, that thing has to be fulfilled within you, whether by a proper source or an improper source, and if you find yourself as a person who's quick to anger, one of my friends actually posted, which is actually what inspired this episode. One of my friends posted on Facebook today that he needed some help, some reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And I told him to inbox me, and when he inboxed me, he told me what was going on. And, he said that he's quick to anger. He gets overwhelmed and he's quick to anger. Much like I preached in my last video, talking about stress. One thing that I think you, and when I say you, I mean everybody, should practice if you find yourself being overwhelmed. Take a deep breath. You just breathe. You feel that air exhaling. You feel it exiting your body. You feel the stress, if not all, a great deal of stress being lifted off your shoulders. And now you can think more clearly. So that's what you should do if you find yourself being overwhelmed. Now, if you find yourself being somebody who's quick to anger, like I said prior, that's usually something that was stemmed from your childhood that wasn't corrected. A lot of times we go through things as children and they aren't corrected nor dealt with as adults, and they manifest. They may lay dormant in us, through our high school years, maybe through our early 20s, but usually around the late 20s, early 30s mark, that's when these things start to show themselves, because your brain, your body, or your brain literally does a diagnostic test on you every single day, every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Your brain is literally working to find things wrong and to correct them, right? So when you get to the point to where everything seems to be working, and there's this thing that has just been laying there dormant, that hasn't been touched, hasn't been thought of, because we usually put trauma in the back of our mind and try to forget about it, but that never works. So when your brain finds this thing, this literally the act of trying to fix it. This is why we go through so many problems. This is why we go through so many emotional problems, stress, anxiety, depression. This is why, because your brain is literally telling you, hey man, we have to work on this, right? And when you open that box, all of the negative stuff comes out: the trauma, the abuse, the violence, the disrespect, the lack of love, the lack of this, the lack of that. This is what needs to happen. It doesn't necessarily need to make you depressed, anxious, or stressed, but it needs to come out. And some people, most often, it manifests itself as stressed, as being overly stressed, overly depressed, and overly anxious. Now, if you find yourself being somebody who is quick to anger, you are literally in a situation to where you do not think about step 2. What do I mean? Well, when I had to go to anger management, when I had to go through this little stint with the legal system for, my ex-girlfriend lying, saying that I was this abusive piece of shit, whole video on YouTube about that. But one thing that I told a lot of the guys who needed to be in anger management is that when you don't think about step 2, you usually do not like what happens at step 2 and 3, because you're faced with a problem. Step 1 is the most important. Step 1 is the most important part of dealing with a problem. When you are faced with a problem, the first step literally dictates the rest of the steps. It dictates the entirety of the situation. So case in point, if somebody bumps into you on accident while you're walking down the street, you may be in a club, a Walmart, a store, a Target, wherever. You may be wherever. Somebody bumps into you by accident. Hey man, I'm sorry. You may have had, some tea, coffee, or drink in your hand and it spills on your clothes. Obviously that situation was an accident. Now you're faced with a problem. The problem is someone bumped you, whether it was accidental or not, and now you have, stains all over your clothes, you're wet, and now you're a little frustrated. Step 1, do you haul off and say, oh man, what the fuck's wrong with you, man? You need to keep your shit together. Watch where you going. Bow, punch him in the face. Or, hey man, listen, it's busy in here. You trying to get out just like me. Hey, it's all right. It happens. They just close. I'm just going to take them off and put them in the dirty clothes hamper when I get home. Just do me a favor and, watch where you're going so you don't bump into anybody else. Perfect. You literally just diffuse the situation before anything else happened. Even if that person, let's use another example. Let's say you're faced with a person that wants to fight you. Step 1 still is it is the most important way. It is the most important step of the entire scenario. If you're faced with a person that wants to get physical with you and you don't want to get physical, if you yell, get loud, and tense up, you're most likely going to fight that person because you're stepping to their level. But if you remain calm, cool, and collected, there's a good chance that person is going to come down, because the one thing I know about emotions is that emotions cannot feed off themselves for too long. Excuse me. Emotions cannot feed off themselves for too long. Someone who is highly emotional needs another source to feed off of. So if somebody comes to you wanting to fight, they can't stay mad for very long, because emotions like anger, they have a very short fuse. They have a very short life. But if you get mad with them, that gives them more incentive to stay mad. So if you stay calm, cool, and collected, hey man, what's the problem? Oh man, I'm gonna do this, that, and the third, and blah, 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 blah. And then they don't act on that anger, they're going to calm down. Even if it's by 1%, they're going to calm down. And eventually you guys are going to separate. Now, if they hit you, completely different story. Beat that boy ass. You know what I'm saying? A completely different story. Completely different story. But 9 times out of 10, most people who want violence don't want to get violent. So you don't need to necessarily worry about that. Protect yourself at all times, of course, but you don't need to worry about that. So my advice to anybody who finds themselves being quick to anger, think about what could happen if you allow this anger to take control of you. If you allow your anger to make you punch somebody in the face, shove somebody, punch a wall, punch your steering wheel, punch glass, punch yourself. Some people literally, they cause self-harm. If you allow your anger to do this to you, what does that say about the rest of your day? If you get mad and punch a wall that clearly has, is made of tougher stuff than your knuckles, now you're going to break your hand, and now you got to deal with a broken hand for the next couple months. When all you had to do was calm down, take a deep breath, think about what you're about to do, process that, and see if the outcome that's going to happen from what you're going to do is what you want to deal with. You know what? I'm really mad. This wall is looking real punchable right now. But I'd rather calm down and not deal with a broken hand, because I kind of need my hand to write stuff and drive and do other things. You know what I'm saying? So just think. We weren't taught to think about things before we do them. We were taught to just have immediate action. Something happens, you act on it immediately. That's usually not the case in these situations. You need to process everything, right? This is why whenever I go to a restaurant or something, I'm aware of all the exits. I'm aware of who's doing what. I'm aware of who's looking shady. I just process my entire surrounding, because I don't know if I might need to get out of here in a second. I process all of these things to give me and the people with me the best outcome of success in case something happens. Now, usually nothing happens, but if somebody walks in with a gun and I see them holding, if I see they got their hand in their trench coat, and if they walk in with a fucking trench coat to begin with, and they just look real shady, they're looking around and they get sweaty and then they start to fidget, that makes me nervous. So I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe we need to either watch this guy or we need to get the fuck out of here. Just process emotions, man. Just process thought. Think about step 2. Think about what's going to happen. Think. The word of the day is think. T-H-I-N-K. Think. And when you think about it, you'll find out that there's really no need for you to feel the way you feel it. Whatever the reason is, if you're not going to worry about it in the next 5 days, don't worry about it in the next 5 minutes. If it's not gonna be that big of a deal in 5 days, why are you giving it 5 minutes? If that's the case, then it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. So that's just dealing with anger. And to be honest, each individual emotion, you don't have to worry about joy and happiness, but each individual negative emotion, anger, sadness, frustration, different levels of anger, which is frustration, different levels of sadness, which is, excessive worry. You need to just think about what you're doing and think about what you're worrying about or what you're mad at, and see if it's worth you being that mad in the first place. Because growing up, we were never put in position to process these things. No one ever told us, hey, we may have heard the term think before you speak, but we never heard the term think before you act. Because your actions literally speak louder than words. If you tell somebody, hey man, I'm gonna punch you in your face at 5 o'clock, and they wait for you until 5 o'clock and you don't punch them in their face, you just wasted their time. You see what I'm saying? Now, had you punched them in the face, you literally told them that you were going to do it, and you did it. You act on what you said. You acted on what you said. Think about your actions. Think about the worth of your actions. Think about how it's going to affect the people around you. See, I am a huge advocate of people being selfish with their time, but that's really only with your time and what you're doing to be progressive in yourself. But when you think about negative actions, think about how that's going to affect the people around you. You never know who's watching. You never know what could happen as a result of your action. So here, for the 1,000,000th time in the last 15 minutes, just take your time, man. Just calm down. Take a deep breath. Process these things. And once you do that, you'll be able to identify what it is about you that makes you this person. Why am I always so angry? Why am I always so sad? Why am I this? Why am I that? Let me think back. Oh, you know what? Growing up, I was in a situation to where I had to be tough at a young age to make this, that, and the third. That's probably why I'm so mad. Oh, growing up, I was taken advantage of a lot, and excuse me, it hurt my feelings. That's probably why I'm so upset. Think about what it could be, what it might be, and then you'll eventually come to what it is. Once you come to what it is, research. You now know what is causing your problem. Now you can fix the problem. Because you can't fix the problem until you find out what the problem is. But once you find out what the problem is, it's literally just a matter of time until you fix it. Until you fix it, right? Have the tough conversations with people who may have wronged you in the past, if they're still in your life. Have the tough conversation with yourself. Sit down, think about it. It's really that simple. Just think about it. You don't have to be this way. You don't have to be this person. You don't have to react to every little thing that happens to you. I can't remember exactly who said it. I think it might have been, a motivational speaker or a rapper. I think it might have been a rapper. Might have been Kevin Gates. I can't remember exactly who said it, but somebody said, not everything that comes my way deserves a reaction out of me. If we react to every single thing that comes our way that causes us some type of frustration or anger, we'd all be dead. If you followed somebody who cut you off on the road, if you followed them to their house and you step out your car and step on their property, you might get shot. That's just one hypothetical situation. But you allowed your anger to guide your actions. You didn't think about step 2. You just thought about step 1. I have to get my hands on this person. I have to show them that this is what happens when you cut me off. I have to make you feel some type of pain because you made me feel frustration. Just think about it, man. It's really that simple. Just think about it. So I really hope you all enjoyed this episode of the Handle That podcast, man. We all go through things. We all have our ups and downs. But if you think about step 2, 3, 4, and 5 and the rest, you'll see that once you do that, you will be able to come up with the best possible step 1. And with that being said, here again, hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram at the Handle That Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, YouTube/Handle That Podcast. Make sure to just process these things, man. Don't let these things control you, because you don't want to be in a situation to where you're thinking about what you could have done once you've already done something negative. You don't want to be thinking about what you could have did while you're in the back of a police car. You don't want to be thinking about what you could have did while you're, got a gunshot wound to your leg. You don't want to be thinking about what you could have did, while you're slowly losing consciousness because you got punched in the head. You don't want to be thinking about that. So, with all that being said, man, I want you to stay groovy, stay cool, stay positive. Think about these actions. Take a deep breath if you're overwhelmed. Calm the fuck down. You know what I'm saying? Don't let these things dictate you. And above all else, handle that.